Sweet Memories of You, written by Ellie Dean, read by Annie Aldington. The moral right of the author has been asserted. Prologue. London, February 1943. Doreen Gray felt a flutter of excitement as she adjusted her little felt hat, gathered up her overnight bag and gas mask box, and left the train she'd boarded at Knockholt Station that morning. She knew some might think it ridiculous for a woman of her age to feel like this. After all, she was 35, the divorced mother of 2 little girls, and held a position of great trust in the MOD. Yet here she was, as giddy and smitten as a schoolgirl, dressed up to the nines in her best slacks, sweater and overcoat, unable to contain herself at the thrill of seeing Archie again. She could only imagine what her snooty sister Doris would have to say about such things, yet she didn't really care. Life was for living, and it was important to live it to the full, for no one knew what tomorrow might bring. As she sat on the bus that would take her to the London docks, she caught sight of her reflection in the grimy window, and was quite taken aback at how love and excitement had enhanced her appearance. Her freshly washed dark wavy hair shone beneath the rather fetching hat, her brown eyes were bright, and her clear skin radiated with her happiness. Archie was coming home for a whole week's leave, while his ship was being refitted for its next trip with the convoy across the Atlantic, and they'd made so many plans to fill each and every moment together that she could only pray nothing would happen to spoil it. She felt the blush rise in her cheeks at the thought of being with him in that small hotel room she'd booked, and the intimacy they would share once they were truly alone. It had been too long since his last leave, too many nights when she'd lain awake, terrified that he might be killed or injured during those perilous weeks at sea, and over the 3 years since they'd met, there had been only brief encounters when he was ashore. In between, she'd had only his letters and sweet memories to sustain her. She drew his latest letter from her handbag and looked fondly at the photograph he'd enclosed with it. Archie Blake was the chief engineer on a destroyer which escorted the convoys of merchant ships back and forth between England and America. He was a great bear of a man who'd escaped the poverty of the East End at 15 through a naval apprenticeship and a career at sea. With thick black hair and beard and dark blue eyes, he was blessed with the sort of unrestrained laughter and joy in life that she found irresistible. Doreen couldn't help but smile as she remembered how he towered beside her as they walked along. His seaman's kit bag slung over one broad shoulder, his gait as rolling as the ocean, and how the other girls would shoot him the glad eye, for he was an imposing figure in his naval uniform. Yet for all his size, he was a gentleman, an unselfish and skilled lover who wrote beautiful letters and could hold her close with such tenderness it made her misty-eyed. Doreen blinked rapidly and hastily stowed the letter and snapshot carefully back in her handbag. The bus had turned the last corner, and she could see the funnels and anti-aircraft guns of his ship above the roofs of the many warehouses lining the docks. She shot the Clippy a grin as she waited for the bus to stop, unable to contain her excitement.
"Lucky old you," the girl said with a knowing wink. "You be sure to give him a kiss from me. All the girls love a sailor, eh?"
"They certainly do," she replied, before jumping down. She walked quickly past the high fence that was topped with great thick rolls of barbed wire towards the heavily barricaded entrance gate, where 2 armed Marines stood guard. Pulling her identification papers and MOD pass from her coat pocket, she had to wait impatiently while they were checked minutely before she was free to enter the dockyards. There was hustle and bustle everywhere, with stevedores loading and unloading the enormous grey ships, cranes lifting vast crates into holds, sailors and marines running to and fro on important missions, and warehousemen shouting orders to porters and the young boys who were employed as runners. Tugs chugged busily through the choppy waters as gulls screeched and mewled overhead amongst the barrage balloons, and barges laden with wood and coal slowly made their majestic way, the great dray horses patiently plodding along the towpaths. Doreen walked confidently through the melee. She was used to being outnumbered by men, for she was one of only a handful of women who worked amongst the boffins and engineers at Fort Halstead Projectile Development Establishment. She was private secretary
Sample complete. Ready to continue?